The issues that matter, the newsmakers who impact our lives. This is Missouri Viewpoints with Mike Ferguson.
Hello, and thank you for joining us on Missouri Viewpoints. This is the program dedicated to the civil and informed discussion of the political, social, economic, and cultural issues that impact us all. I'm Mike Ferguson. We are coming to you from Lindenwood University in St. Charles. You know, sometimes debates over one thing spill over onto another thing. Now, let me make sense of that. That's the case when it comes to tobacco and smoking. There are two basic discussions involved. One is about our health, and the other is about public policy. And most of the time that you're talking about public policy, well, you're also talking about personal freedom. Is there a balance to protecting our health and our freedoms that we need to find? Well, that's only one part of the discussion. The health part doesn't have to be part of politics. We'll discuss both. In about 15 minutes, we're going to examine the latest trend in smoking, the so-called tobacco alternatives or e-cigarettes. Cynthia Cabrera is the executive director of the Smoke-Free Alternatives Trades Association, and she joins us to explain what these things are and give her thoughts on efforts to regulate them like the cigarettes you see at the store every day. Right now, let's get a progress report on the efforts to get more Missourians to kick the habit, or maybe not get started in the first place. Matt Kuhlenbeck is with the Missouri Foundation for Health. Matt, welcome to Missouri Viewpoints.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Now, one of the things when it comes to anything with smoking, and of course, in health classes, I heard it from when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, and there's extensive health programs in schools now and all over the place, and yet people still pick up a cigarette and choke through the first several cigarettes to where they can actually smoke and then eventually get addicted. From all the studies that you've looked at and what the foundation's done, why on earth are people still starting smoking today?
It varies. And so the answer to that question is almost as individual as somebody's attempt to actually stop smoking. When you look at why somebody smokes, it could be anything from as simple as somebody told me not to do it, and so therefore I am. And so when you look at youth are the most likely to begin smoking. And so when you have adult figures coming in and telling a teenager not to do something, first reaction is, well, why shouldn't I be doing it and why can't I try it? The other piece also, we see trends where very low income individuals are often the highest prevalence rate for individuals who use tobacco products. And when you're looking for a release, you're looking for some type of emotional enjoyment, you're looking for some way to relax, oftentimes looking at cigarettes, alcohol, or other things as one of those methods that's relatively cost effective. It's also a way in which you can get an immediate physical response. In addition to those, when you look at individuals who also may be looking at whether or not they're going to be, for lack of a better way of describing it, alive by the time they're 40. The long-term impacts of tobacco use oftentimes may not be that big of a deal in the short term when you're younger, 10 foot tall, and bulletproof. And so looking at those long-term impacts, they'll affect me when I'm 50, when I'm 60 years old. I'm not going to be a statistic. It's not an immediate harm that you normally see with other dangerous products.
Okay, when I decided to do a program on tobacco issues, I don't want to be the same news and public affairs program that constantly asks the same questions. I really want to get into information that parents can use and schools can use and everybody can use. I want to start with the one of the first things you said about young people responding to the message basically of don't just say no to cigarettes, just say no to tobacco. And you're right, that youthful rebelliousness, it tempts them to go ahead and do it. So when it comes to preventing tobacco use in children, if telling them directly not to do it doesn't work sometimes, what are the approaches we should be taking?
So we've seen some very successful programs in Missouri. One of them is called Project Smokebusters. It was actually created here in Missouri and is spread to several schools across the state. The way the project works is it's actually youth talking to youth, but not about just the dangers of tobacco use and the physical health aspects of it, but also how youth are targets for the tobacco industry. And so how are they being manipulated to look at tobacco in a way that it's attractive? So how are advertising documents and other types of things being designed to make tobacco look attractive? How does it look as an adult type of activity? So if you're a young person, you want to be an adult. tobacco seems to be a good scapegoat. And so these programs are designed to empower youth to make those decisions on their own, provide them with the tools and resources and understanding to know, one, what the health issues are and the common things that we all know, but then also understand how marketing is used to influence behavior. And so not just youth marketing directed at individuals across the spectrum, but then how that then plays into a youth's perspective on a particular product, in this instance, tobacco.
So it sounds like maybe you're kind of using the same psychology as I tell them no, they may want to do it yes, but if you tell them that they're a marketing target, hopefully the response is they're going to push back and say, you're not going to tell me what to do.
Exactly. If you're looking at it as they're manipulating me to make a decision that I don't want to make, you're more likely to rebuttal that decision or rebuttal that argument than you are to say, well, this is something that all adults do, therefore I should be doing it as well.
And this is a separate approach to the laws and the regulations on the books. And I've been on a city council, and I remember when the smoking ban proposal came up in my community, and hearing both sides of it. And the Missouri Foundation for Health, you've been looking into these as well. The regulations, I don't think, are going to stop anybody from smoking. I don't think it's going to stop anybody from picking. That's just my personal observation. So what is the purpose of them? And if somebody hears that there is a smoking ban being proposed in their community, what is the likelihood of what they're really dealing with in their real life?
So with all smoking bans or smoking ordinance or laws or whatever prohibition you want to look at, it's not actually banning tobacco. It's looking at how do you reduce exposure to secondhand smoke in enclosed environments. And so a lot of these policies are designed to limit indoor smoking. And so if you're at a bar, at a restaurant, at a place of business, not having to be exposed to secondhand smoke in those businesses. A lot of ways they are looked at as, one, the consumers or the customers in those different types of businesses being not exposed to those products, but then also the workers who are in those environments for 4 to 6 to 8 hours at a time being exposed to secondhand smoke as well. We know there's very detrimental health impacts to being exposed to secondhand smoke. There are studies that show that 30 minutes in a smoke-filled room, if you're a non-smoker, you will have metabolized as much smoke as a smoker would if they were smoking as well. And so you're actually, within a 30-minute time span, you'll actually blood test the same level of nicotine as somebody who is actively smoking in that room as well.
And when I was on, like I said, I was on the Board of Aldermen in Grandview, and our room was flooded with business owners that said, hey, we own bars or we own, bowling alleys or whatever. We don't allow children into these. Every adult is well aware that smoking's allowed. Everybody who chooses to work for us knows smoking's allowed. Let us make the choice. What's your thoughts on that?
Two thoughts on it. One, when we look at how businesses are regulated, they're regulated in various different ways. And so we look at how a community looks at their business community and how they work. There's sanitation issues, there's regulations on different types of fire code and other types of pieces. When we look at age restrictions and other kinds of pieces, again, it comes back to those folks who are working within those facilities and people who may not be smokers being in them as well. When we look at the business rights aspect of the argument and the discussion, it gets into a very volatile piece, as you well exposed. And so it gets into questions of what is the role of government in these types of environments. And it's an argument that has valid responses on both sides of the equation. And really what it comes down to is, how do you protect the public good in the sense of a public health type of aspect? And so it comes to a community's decision as to whether or not they're going to implement these types of policies. When we look at the arguments around whether or not you can choose to work in a particular smoke-filled environment, in our current economic status, if you have a job, you're in a much better shape than a lot of individuals. And so wanting to keep that, not rock the boat, to be able to maintain your choice of employment is important. And so oftentimes you see those challenges of, I really like where I'm at, I like who I'm working with, I like the organization that I work for. I think I can deal with this small aspect of it, so I'm not going to say anything. And so you get into kind of a rub. And if somebody wanted to then go to another place of business and say, I'm a bartender and I enjoy being a bartender, if all the bars are smoke-filled, there's not a lot of smoke-free options as well. And so it becomes a difficult conversation to have as an employee of an employer in these situations.
Every smoker that I know who's a friend of mine tells me at one point or another they've tried to quit. And they just say, I can't do it. I personally don't smoke, so I don't really understand that. But obviously, it's one of the hardest things to do is to stop smoking. Let's start with kind of the science. Why is it so hard to smoking in the few minutes we've got left? Mm-hmm. And then if somebody really truly wants to stop that habit, how can they do it?
So a little bit of the science. A lot of the information that we've been presented with and a lot of the studies point to the addictive nature of tobacco being on par with heroin and other types of addictive drugs. And so when we look at those types of connections, it's exceptionally difficult to quit. In addition to, one, the physical aspect of it, so the actual physical addiction that you have, there's social aspects as well. So you hang out with people who are also smokers. You're in environments where you have smoking triggers. As somebody who was a former smoker, that after you have a dinner, after you have a heavy meal, having a cigarette afterwards is actually quite something that's pleasurable. And so you have to, in many ways, retrain your ability in your social aspects in addition to just the physical addiction aspects as well. And for somebody who's wanting to quit, there's lots of options available to them, most of which are free or very low cost.
Where do they find those? Let's go right to that.
So right to that. So the first place to go is your physician. If you have a physician, talk with them about your options. They could be anything from working with a cessation counselor, so an individual who could walk you through the process, to using nicotine replacement products, to other types of drugs that can help you through that process. Free resources are available through the National Quit Line. So 1-800-QUIT-NOW is a national hotline that will connect you with trained cessation counselors. It's available in Missouri as well as any other state. And those counselors have varying degrees of ability to help based on income level and other types of pieces. Another free resource is becomeanx.org. Become an X is a website, and it actually is an online community of people trying to quit. And so it's individuals who can share common things. So some of the communities that have been built through this website are people with pets who want to quit for their pets. And so they can have like that conversation as an individual of this is why I'm doing it, and they can work with people who share that same rationale.
And we've just got a minute or so left here. If somebody says, I've been smoking for 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 years, it doesn't matter now if I quit or not. What's the response? My
response to that is when you quit smoking, you immediately begin to change the physical aspects of what's happening to you. Within 6 months, you will be a completely different person physically as a result. It's never too late to quit. The ability to quit and what it then means for an individual is long-lasting, regardless of when you do that.
All right, Matt Kuhlenbeck from the Missouri Foundation for Health. Thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you very much.
Now, still ahead, you've probably seen the TV commercials, the ones that say, we're all adults here, let's take our freedom back. Well, those are for electronic cigarettes or e-cigs. So what are they, and are they as dangerous as regular cigarettes? Cynthia Cabrera from the Smoke-Free Alternatives Trades Association joins me in a moment.
I'm one unlucky guy. The chance of being involved in a robbery is 1 in 757. The chances of being struck by lightning 1 in 750,000.
Please fasten your seatbelts for unexpected turbulence.
The chances of being a victim in an airline crash, 1 in 29 million. Hey, could I get some peanuts? The chances of being involved in a car crash are far greater than lightning strikes and plane crashes. And if you are texting while driving, your risk of crash increases 23 times. Now, I may be an unlucky guy, but I don't have to be part of that statistic, and neither do you. Drive responsibly.
Over 13 million people are affected by famine, war, and drought in the Horn of Africa.
When you hear about suffering on this scale, you feel powerless.
But there's hope, because saving lives doesn't take a lot.
It just takes a lot of us.
Text a donation of $10, but do more than donate. Forward the facts to everyone you know.
Forward from our site.
Forward on Facebook.
And forward on Twitter.
We are the relief.
Salad on Saturday, fruit on Friday, throw a ball Thursday. Water Wednesday, touch your toes Tuesday. Let's move Monday, swap us next Sunday.
60 minutes of physical activity a day and eating well can help get your child healthy. So keep them active and eating well every day. Get ideas, get involved, get going at letsmove.gov. That's letsmove.gov.
Well, it's the latest trend in smoking. Some say it's a good idea because it doesn't involve actual tobacco and, frankly, that smell. Yeah, you know what smell I'm talking about. Others say it's an easy way to get non-smokers used to nicotine, and that could actually be the legal gateway drug to the other legal gateway drug of tobacco. And I'm talking about electronic cigarettes. Let's find out exactly what these things are so we can have the informed discussion of what to do with them. Joining me now is Cynthia Cabrera. She is the Executive Director of the Smoke-Free Alternatives Trades Association. Cynthia, welcome to Missouri Viewpoints.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Cynthia, I'm holding in my hand right now an electronic cigarette. I'm told that it is a disposable one. I guess that there are a couple different kinds. It looks just like the regular cigarette that you would buy at the store. What's different about what I'm holding in my hand right now?
Well, what you're looking at, a disposable electronic cigarette, is one form of what we call vaporizing devices. They don't all look like that. So one of the misconceptions out there is that this is designed to lure people into traditional smoking by way of vaping. Your opening statement, you said this is a new form of smoking. It's not smoking because there's not combustible material. So the product that you're holding has a look like a typical cigarette, but that's just the beginning. There are so many variations. There are so many different looks to this product, and they're not designed to lure non-smokers. There's no interest for non-smokers. What this is an adult alternative for people who want to use, they want to get their nicotine fix, their hit, but they don't want to do it with a traditional tobacco combustible cigarette.
So how do these work? I think that with a lot of people, skepticism of the product or worry about the product comes from not knowing what this actually is. How does this work and how is it different from a regular cigarette?
Well, for starters, you don't get to plug in a regular cigarette. So these are battery-operated devices. Frankly, they're more technology products than anything else. So the part that contains nicotine, if it contains nicotine, because some of them have zero nicotine. So if you look at it, it's a metal cylinder. Inside, it's got a heating element. It's got a lithium-ion battery, a really small one. It's probably got a little LED tip at the end. And then it's got some cotton, and it's got a little receptacle, basically the cartridge part. And that will have a sort of solution, not sort of solution, it's PG and some flavoring and possibly nicotine at a certain level, depending on what strength it is. And that's it.
So we're not talking about a tobacco product, because when people think of smoking, they think of tobacco, but you didn't list any tobacco just now.
That's correct. And as I pointed out, some of them don't even contain nicotine. And the nicotine, one of the misconceptions out there, and I've heard it on multiple interviews and articles I've read it in, people will say these contain liquid nicotine. They contain a small amount of nicotine, so 1.8% by volume or 0.6% by volume or 1.2%. There's not straight liquid nicotine in these products.
So when it comes
to propylene glycol or vegetable glycerin mixed with flavoring and possibly some nicotine.
Okay, so now I know these are kind of a new product here. Have there been any studies done when it comes to the impact on health? Because, the fact of the matter is, if somebody holds this up, they draw it in, they blow out the vapor, which looks like smoke to a lot of people. I think a lot of people just assume that they're doing the same thing to their body or something similar as if they're using a regular cigarette. What is the health impact of the nicotine or the nicotine replacement versus the tobacco products?
Well, they're not positioned as a nicotine replacement product. What they are is an alternative to smoking a traditional combustible cigarette. Now, that being said, since they don't contain tobacco, they also don't contain hundreds up to thousands of different chemicals that can be found in tobacco. Now, if you use a typical combustible cigarette, I think the average time it takes for the smoke to dissipate, that secondhand smoke, is probably 22 to 28 minutes. Vapor dissipates in about 20 seconds.
Yeah, and I know it doesn't have that smell. I've got some friends who are smokers, and they'll go back and forth between these two. There are some friends, I won't even go to their home because the smell permeates their house so badly. But I've got one friend who has these, and I don't mind her smoking it in my kitchen because it makes no smell.
Well, she's not smoking. She's vaping.
Oh, okay. Well, that's why
she's not smoking. And this is one of the reasons this product is so popular. I mean, there are people, just like you said, you won't visit a friend's home. There are older folks who smoke traditional cigarettes, and this is an alternative that allows them to be around their grandchildren or their family members without subjecting them to the traditional secondhand smoke that we know is very dangerous.
Now, it was interesting. I was telling some people here in the studio earlier that we were doing this program, today regarding these products, and one person volunteered, oh yeah, I stopped smoking by using that. That's one of the ways I stepped down. And we've also got other people saying that they're concerned that this could be an easy way to lure people into smoking, and you mentioned that a little bit earlier. Has there been any studies done on the impact of using this? Let's start with stopping smoking. Can this help someone stop smoking?
There have been some studies done internationally that pointed to this being a useful tool to help people do that if they choose to. And I've heard anecdotally a lot of people mention that they've done it. But the product isn't positioned that way at this time. It's not a smoking cessation product. It's an alternative. Now, I can take a phone book and I can use it to prop up the table, and I'm using it for something that it wasn't intended for, but it's not hurting anything either.
Okay, and then...
So until we have time to study the product in more depth, I mean, traditional tobacco smokers, when we have 100 years of smoking data and information that we can use to draw conclusions. The fact that this is not a tobacco product means that we need to give it time to study it and understand the impact of it. But right off the bat, we know that it doesn't contain tobacco or any of the damaging chemicals and carcinogens that are in a traditional tobacco cigarette.
Now, a lot of the addiction involved with smoking does, involve the nicotine, and obviously the carcinogens, as you just mentioned, we've established are not involved in this product right here that I'm holding in my hand. And so I'll let you address some of the concerns that I've heard people say, well, it seems like it might help somebody get started, kind of be a gateway product into smoking. Is that a valid concern?
It's not a valid concern, and I'll tell you why. I'm a perfect example. I started working for an e-cig company before I became executive director of this company. I have access to samples from our members, from potential members, people that I meet at trade shows, that kind of thing. I don't vape. I have no interest in vaping. It's not something that appeals to people if they're not already inclined to smoke. And this is a product that's marketed to current smokers. People who are non-smokers are not interested in this product. There's not a good reason for it. Now, the reason that we can point to this, the reason that we can be so sure about this, is because one of the reasons that stops people from not using a traditional tobacco cigarette is that they have that hand-to-mouth fixation. They have that hand-to-mouth movement that they're used to. Someone who doesn't smoke, who's never smoked a traditional cigarette, they don't have that. They don't have that hand-to-mouth fixation. They don't have that feeling that they need to be holding something. So it doesn't make sense that it would become a gateway because it's not the right audience.
Cynthia, we just have a couple of minutes left here to have this discussion. I do appreciate your time. There are some efforts, as you're well aware, and I know your trade association is dealing with, regarding either fully including these products right here in smoking regulations or smoking bans, in public places and restaurants and things like that, or others looking at crafting separate regulations for these products. What are the standard, concerns that you have with these regulations, and what do you think is the proper response to them?
Okay, so what they're talking about is regulating them under the 2009 Tobacco Control Act. The Tobacco Control Act was designed to address all of the health concerns that have come about as a result of traditional cigarette smoking. This is not a traditional cigarette. And so a regulation under the Tobacco Control Act is not appropriate. What we're advocating for is regulation. No one has a problem with that. But what we need is regulation that's appropriate to this particular product, addressing the fact that it's a technology product that doesn't contain tobacco and shouldn't be regulated as a tobacco product until the FDA can prove or show that this product has the same harmful effects as tobacco cigarettes. It shouldn't be regulated that way.
What would be the appropriate regulations that you all would be okay with?
Well, right now we're okay with age restriction. We're okay with listing all the ingredients of the products. What we want is to maintain innovation and access to this product. So GMPs, good manufacturing practices, standardization, all of those things are fine. And age restriction is the number one thing that everyone is concerned about, and this is not a product intended for children. So we're okay with prohibiting the sale of them to children.
All right, Cynthia Cabrera, I really appreciate your time today, because I think this is something just a lot of people don't know what these things are, and we can't decide what to do with them if we don't know what they are. If somebody wants to keep up with your efforts or learn more about this, what's the best way to do it?
Our website, www.S as in Sam, F as in Frank, A as in Apple, T as in Thomas, A as in Apple.org.
All right, Cynthia.
Smoke-free alternatives.
Cynthia Cabrera, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
So what do you think? Let us know on Facebook. Just find Missouri Viewpoints there on Facebook and like the show. From there, just click on the comments section that is attached to this program and offer your viewpoint. Thank you for being with us on behalf of Lindenwood University Television. I'm Mike Ferguson, and we will talk to you again next week.